I studied fashion in college, and it's always been something that I like loved. So I'm stoked to talk. And I want to kind of get a sense of your background. And I know that you grew up in and studied in Japan. It's like a fashion hub. So I'm sure that that totally influenced your style. What did you learn? What did you take away from that time?
Yeah, I think for me, I'm half Korean, and so I grew up in South Korea, and so I moved to America at the age of 6. But my family still lives overseas, so I actually went back to Asia. So my mom was living in Japan at the time when I turned 21, and so that's where I spent about 2 or 3 years in Japan, just involved in the culture. And I kind of accidentally fell into fashion. It wasn't something I was pursuing. So I went to college for journalism and always thought I was going to start like a news media company. And then I was in Japan, didn't speak the language, not working, and I was so bored. And so I would just go to the local coffee shop and kind of just hang out, and um, ended up getting a photography gig. And so I went um, and shot photos at events. And so at one of these events I was at, I took a photo of a group of Japanese girls, and they were just super nice, super friendly. And they kind of communicated to me that they wanted their pictures. So I sent them their pictures. And then about a week later, they sent me a message inviting me to what ended up being a fashion show. So I didn't know that at the time, but I was so bored that I just said yes. And I went, and it was my first fashion show that I ever went to. But I would say I like define that moment as the moment that I decided I want to pursue fashion, become a designer, and then kind of study what it takes to get there.
That's what happened with me too. I thought I wanted to be in fashion, and now I am pursuing journalism. So the total opposite of you.
Right.
But how did you come, to create your own company? And talk to us about what the name means. What inspired that? What does it mean to you?
Sure. Yeah. So my brand's called Castles and Queens. I made the name up a long time ago, but officially launched just within the last year. So it's been this vision of mine for a while. For me, I think it's a multitude of things. I kind of want it to be subjective to the audience when people hear it, and I just get the funniest reactions of what people think it like what it means. To me personally, as the founder and designer behind it, it's this like metaphor that I picture that we view ourselves as royalty. And so castles and queens is just this idea that, um, like we are kings and we are queens. And it's verbiage that we hear a lot in culture, but to make it like a mission statement was kind of the goal within the name.
From reading a little bit about you, that you're inspired by social events and things that happen kind of in our society. What's something happening lately that's inspired you?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of movements that inspire me. And I think personally, um, like I come from different experiences. I'm biracial, I'm half Korean, half Black. Growing up in a country like South Korea, but then coming to America at a young age, there was just a lot, between, a lot of life I've lived. And with that, like I've met a lot of cool people who've kind of helped me, you know, find my voice and encourage me to share that. So I think with creating a brand for me, um, it just kind of came easy. And it was something that I knew that I had to kind of emphasize on, uh, I think, challenging the people, my audience, and people that I interact with and the brand interacts with, to kind of opening the perspective. So with that, we focus our collections on different social narratives in America. It can be, super, descriptive one collection, or it can be kind of like a loose, interpretation of like what this can mean to you. And yeah, and I think honestly everything around me kind of inspires me, and any movement I tend to deem um, as good, because I think it does bring awareness to the things that we need to progress in our society. I've never thought that progression has made us go backwards. It's always kind of catapulted us forward. So
Yeah, and I think along with societal, fluctuation and what goes on, just everyday things and events can inspire too. And looking at your collections, like the most recent collection is the Lovers collection, which I'm sure maybe was inspired by, Valentine's Day coming up, or things that, like you're saying, all these different movements with BLM and things like that, we really need to kind of unify and like love each other. What goes into creating a collection like the Lovers Collection, for example? And I'm just speaking from assumption, but I'd love to hear from you what really inspired that collection.
So a lot goes into creating a collection, way too much. But also at the same time, it is kind of a thrill because you get to enjoy the process, and then when it's out there, you get to just feel so relieved that it's out. So into creating a collection, so my brand focuses on garments right now in terms of menswear and womenswear. And just creating a garment, there's a lot that goes into that. You have to create a pattern first. And so a pattern is kind of your custom shape or silhouette, what kind of sets you apart as a brand from other brands. From then you pick a fabric, something that you want to kind of, every day we wear clothes, but we never like, before I got into fashion, I never really, thought much about what I was wearing. But picking a fabric is such a key element into creating any piece. And so this last collection, I focused a lot on French cherry, on satin, on velvet. And so those were kind of like my fabric families that I chose to play with. From that, you go to the production side of things. So that includes cutting and sewing, any kind of finishing. And then obviously like you have to publish it. And so that, is the media side. We did a campaign film, obviously the collection, photo shoots and the website. So there's a lot that goes into it. It took me quite a while. Lovers is special. It's my first collection actually. And Lovers is a story of a young American girl who falls in love. Just a very American kind of love story. It went very wrong, and she ends up kind of being coerced by her lover, and he is, a modern day, American pimp, and so he ends up pimping her out, and she falls into the cycle of human trafficking. And it's a domestic story of human trafficking, and it's our interpretation of that. So with that, we created a film with two actors that I met at a party like 2 years ago and kept them in mind for this project 2 years later, and ended up working out. And to us, it's I want it to be an art piece that really kind of just makes you think and challenges you, but also reflects like who we are as a brand, and the clothing that we just put out.
I mean, it seems like the journalism studies did you good, because at the end of the day, that's what you're doing. You're telling a story and you're incorporating things that are happening around you that are important. Human trafficking and sex trafficking is definitely a problem depending on where you live. I mean, I'm from the Midwest and I know it's a huge issue out there. Out here in big cities, it's so easy to get caught up in that. So taking that aspect and then creating a narrative behind it kind of makes it easier for people to understand. And then you're using the expression through the clothing. Speaking of, important topics and things going on in society, sustainability is a really big thing right now. So I kind of want to talk about your involvement with the Frankie Collective Vintage, and what is that importance to you with using vintage clothing and sustainability?
Yeah, absolutely. So as well as a designer, I am the LA production manager for the brand called Frankie Collective. They're based in Vancouver, Canada. So our relationship is, cross borders, which is really cool. But they're an amazing brand, and I think their ethos and kind of mission from the beginning has been to save the earth from fast fashion. And so they use garments. So what they'll do is like they'll send me garments, and I will like cut new pieces from old garments. So we call that rework. And I think that's what's amazing. I think sustainability is super important in fashion, because fashion is a huge industry in the world, or it has so much potential to make purposeful clothing, And I think especially the younger generation, millennials, Gen Z coming up, they kind of have to have that element, when they go to commerce, or, they get excited about a brand. They're just really passionate about the earth. Yeah, I'm super pumped to work with the Frankie Collective, and, they keep me very busy, but to me as well, it's also been a challenge as a traditional designer, because it's, kind of out of my element. And for the last 6 months, I've had to just learn things that I didn't even go to school for. But they just have an amazing team, and it's been awesome.
We talk about how what you wear is a great way to express yourself for self-expression, but also, we have to keep in mind that the fashion industry is a huge contributor to climate change and what's going on in the world. So brands and designers, they do have this kind of ethical responsibility to create clothing and distribute clothing that has some type of sustainability and some type of purpose to give back. Yeah, I totally agree. And that's something we've actually talked about on the podcast before. And studying fashion in school, it's something we learn about. You're involved in a lot. You're doing a lot. What is next for you? What's next for your company?
The fashion calendar is pretty quick, and so we're always doing something. So my autumn winter collection released in November, so we are working on spring summer right now, and so expect some kind of release from us in March and April. When I got plugged in, it was something that I've dreamed of for so long, just to be, running my own company and brand and just be creating every day. And now that I'm in it like full time, I just want a nap. That's all I want. So, but yeah, so the next thing we're working on is our next collection.
What advice do you have for somebody who is super creative and wants to channel that creativity into designing, maybe clothing specifically, but just designing anything in general?
I would just say get plugged in. And I know that's a very cliche thing to say, but probably half of my experiences came from pursuing just a place where I felt like I could help in a way. And with that, came a lot of knowledge. And that knowledge is a form of payment in a sense. And so I remember when I came back from Japan to LA, I'd taken classes of studying design, and wanting to pursue that full time. But, none of the doors opened up right away. And it was just kind of a moment for me where I had to realize, like, I have to go and get this if I really want it. I began to stock shelves at retail stores. I became an assistant stylist. I worked my way up to a stylist. Then finally made my way up to like high-end luxury stores in Los Angeles, where you see kind of these top tier clientele, and you see these like cultural like trendsetters and these kind of icons walk through the store. And these were all just learning moments for me when I was in my early 20s of like really kind of soaking it in. And then from then I actually became an intern in production, because production was something in my belt that I didn't know yet, and so just to work for free, but also to learn that much so that I felt confident enough to one day start my own brand. It's a journey, we all have to remember that. And I think if you can get plugged in anywhere, if you have someone who is well versed in this industry, like just learn as much as you can from them. I would always advise that.
Yeah, that's really interesting because a lot of my guests come on and they say the best advice they have is just start. And I don't disagree with that, but I totally agree with what you're saying. If you listen to the episodes, they always say do what you're doing, just start. And it's not ever really that, is it? Like even with what I'm doing, I didn't just start. I moved out here and I interned and I watched people and I connected with people before I put my name and my face on something and called it mine.
Yeah.
Because you're going to have a lot of failures before you're successful, and nobody knows everything. Like, I think what you're saying is so valuable. You have to have a thirst for knowledge, like to know all the different aspects. It's not like I like clothes, so I want to create a clothing line. Like, you have to know the production, the design, what it means to have an ethical brand. Like, things like that are so important. And there's a lot that goes into it. That's not just for fashion design, but also for production, also for entertainment media. Everything, applies to that. So that's great advice. I always love to end with something positive just because I think the world needs positivity. So, do you have anything positive in your life or in the news or in fashion to share?
So my mom lives in Korea, and with COVID, it's been um, about a year and a half of not being able to see someone that you love, and it's been super tough. And she gave me a call the other day to tell me that she, because she was alone for all, as we all were kind of being isolated, but that they are, opening up, and she feels very happy in a long time. And she has met like a great group of friends, and she's a single lady, by the way. So I'm protective over her as her son, but I think I mean, to me, like that's the greatest news. You got to keep the ones close to you, super close, and anytime like they succeed and win, you succeed and win. So
I agree 100%. Yeah, my dad actually, I was raised by just my dad, so I'm very protective over him too. And I haven't seen him since I moved out to LA. So it's been a while because of COVID. But today he actually got his second shot, his second round of vaccine. So there's an end in sight for everybody, not just us. Everybody is going to see better days really soon. You have been amazing. I would love for you to tell people where they can find you, your company, anything related to what you're doing right now.
sure. So again, our brand's called Castles and Queens. So our social is just at Castles and Queens. Our website is castlesandqueens.com. And yeah, just be on the lookout. We're a young and upcoming brand, and we definitely have something to say. So I'm excited for kind of the world to hear our message.